Hi, everybody. Sorry about that.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for joining us. I will hand over to you and feel free to share your screen
Sure.
and we'll get into Sloptimism and hypergambling.
Yes. Okay. So first off, apologies. I have Tuesday is garbage day in my neighborhood, and there's garbage trucks all around my house. So if you hear the noises, that's what it is. Hi, I'm Daniel Keller. I am a former artist, and I've been described as a internet theorist. And currently, I am a partner at Aiden, which is a new fund incubated by Tribute Labs, which stands for Automated Diligence Investment Network. I forget the acronym often. And it's basically a rethinking of a DAO where there's actually an autonomous, very, very elaborate agent system that does diligence and a network of scouts. And the kicker is we share half of the carry for any deal that any of the scouts source. If anybody's interested in joining, hit me up. Get your friends' projects funded, get a little piece of the action. There's really no downsides at all. It's a pretty cool system. That being said, really glad to be here. Thank you, Nick George, for inviting me. What's up, Story Protocol? I'm going to share my screen. 1 second. Okay. So this is the first time I've attempted to give a talk on this, and it's a bit disjointed, and here are some random notes, and I think it's going to be a little bit weird considering the hackathon context, but here we go. So I'm going to start off with just a few of the basic assumptions that I have that kind of orient me culturally in general, and also are like the basis of Sloptimism. Generally, I think novel cultural forms emerge in the wake of new technologies. This is not a new phenomenon. Obviously, until there was, cameras, there was no films. There was the introduction of the micro groove, which allowed for 33 RPM, which invented the actual album as a form. Generally, new cultural forms are downstream of these types of things. You can just kind of keep that in your head. My other basic assumption is that we are kind of in the early days of the singularity. We are undergoing techno-capital acceleration as described by Nick Land and other people. There's no negotiating this. This is just kind of the path that we're on. There are a lot of dynamics that are leading us to this, but it's not really up to us. There are a handful of people that actually are directing, these forces, and even they are ultimately just, at the mercy of much larger flows of history than them. Because of this, and because I think AGI is near and automation is inevitable, I think UBI is going to happen. I think it sounds politically very out of step considering all the concern about inflation and everything, but I think it's going to happen because there's no option other than that unless the elites want to, have mass riots. So in the absence of a labor market, the main paths left for upward mobility are attention economy arbitrage and hypergambling. You can see this in general now as those have become more prominent activities. I don't think UBI is necessarily going to be generous. I don't think it's necessarily going to be universal. So there will be a lot of need to do these other things to sort of succeed. I think this is bullish for crypto and meme coins, etc. And so all these things make me assume that the most interesting new cultural developments of the next 5-10 years, they're going to happen at this intersection between AI, attention economy, speculation in general. Okay, so I love portmanteaus and neologisms in general. I think they're really useful. They're fun. They're a little bit cheesy as well. I've always kind of admired them. In my previous art career, I had a whole series of work. You can see one of these in the background. They were called FUBU career captchas. These are back from 2013. I used a Markov chain to generate random words from this one kind of anti-tech document to come up with novel professions of the future or ideas from the future. And then I rendered them as CAPTCHAs and then 3D printed them and carved out a lot of materials and assembled them. Anyways, I think that portmanteaus are really powerful. And I think that there's a lot of power in coining new words. I had friends that coined words like normcore, et cetera, in the past, or witch house. And I'm dating myself a lot, obviously, but I always saw how much currency that had, and also how important they were for actually defining the future. Like, you couldn't really, normcore existed before normcore was defined, but you sort of, distill it or capture it by coming up with a word. I think it's also pretty useful in a world without as much clean copyright protection. You're gonna, and you're being identified as the coiner of a phrase by LLMs is going to be important. Last year, I saw a lot of talk about slop. I very deliberately decided I'm going to coin a new word around slop and try to mark my territory with it. So this is the tweet I wrote, just kind of covering all my ground: sloptimism, slopulence, sloptocracy, slopportunism, sloptionality, slopaganda, slopocalypse, sloptimization, sloponomics, slopulism, slopdics, slopium, slopocost. That's the reply. There's a lot of them. I just wanted to make sure I cover them all in a joking way, but out of all of these, I did find sloptimism to be the most evocative. And then just around that time last year, I kept on seeing these instances of, I was like, oh, it's real. Like, this is a new attitude that I've described, or a condition. Yeah, sloptics. All these are, they're great. So I did it last year. I started it, and basically the only thing I did is I tweeted the word a lot. I quote tweeted it a lot, and people started, publishing things about it themselves, and they did quote me, and that was enough for me to get into the LLM. So if you search any of the LLMs, you ask who coined this phrase, it's me. So anyways, I thought it was an important experiment, and I have not gained any actual wealth from this, but I think it's a good proof of something. And Sean Monahan, who was one of the coiners of normcore, he helped. He did help, I will admit, and he wrote a whole thing about sloptimism as well. So what I think links sloptimism, slop, hypergambling, attention economy arbitrage, which I'll get into the definitions of, is prediction. There was a pretty interesting article that was published by A16Z, which I think is a random place to read cultural theory, but Alex Danco wrote this really, I think, brilliant article. Prediction is the successor to postmodernism. And he was the first person that I think kind of defined that link, that what is happening right now is prediction, next token prediction, and prediction markets. And those are the same essential thing. So I think it's a safe bet to, bet on this continuing as a trend, and that the line between prediction and creation will become increasingly blurry. And again, safe bet, novel cultural forms are going to be invented here at this intersection. So what is attention economy arbitrage? Lots of examples of it here, as you can see, but generally, I think it is an acknowledgement that, at least I'm coming from an artist perspective, that making the art you made stop becoming the central kind of activity, and it was much more about the distribution and about converting that attention you got from social media into some other saleable thing. Even if that was an art object, the primary place where you were marketing it was through social media. So here are, a lot of different examples. Some of them are less arbitrage. I think in the case of like, the NPC trend, that's like all in one platform, and that's actually just kind of like being subsumed by a platform. But in the case of, Brad Trammell or Josh, these are podcasts. They get attention in the New York Times, and they convert that into subscriptions. Azalea Banks converts her notoriety into CMOS gel, and ultimately this is like the same behavior. And it's one of the few ways that is, an easy way to make money on the internet. It's kind of the central activity. So what is hypergambling? Oh, I just lost my light. Sorry. So I think this tweet is not a great definition, but it's okay for now. And I'll just read his. But hypergambling is the frontier of a new financial subculture which embodies the growing disconnect between tangible money and notions of intrinsic value. And I actually see hypergambling as in the direct lineage of conceptual art and the dematerialization of the art object. And that maybe started in the 60s as a bit of a critique about notions of value. But as these things tend to go, they stop becoming critical, and eventually people forgot what was critical about them in the original, in the first place, and just kind of do it unironically. So I think it's just about sort of these absurdist forms of value creation where the price becomes a bit of the punchline or becomes the content itself. And I wanted to show the link between both crypto stuff and contemporary art. I think the Banana Comedian by Maurizio Catalan, which Justin Sun bought and then ate a banana. He didn't eat the piece. That's another important thing. It's a certificate. That's what he bought. This is all hypergambling to me. I'll let this video play first. Oh no, you can't hear the sound. Well, there's captions. It's Mr. Wonderful. It was quiet. Sorry, I thought it was the system audio would be playing through. Anyways, you saw the captions, I guess, in the screen. I saw Mr. Wonderful post this last year, and this was when I was like, okay, I'm actually onto something. I think here. This is what artist's role is now, and this sort of his outfit. He's in some mall in Dubai, I think, or something, where he's recording this. He has his insane watch on. Somehow, this all just, I think, kind of defines the aesthetic. I think also, the election of Trump, the Trump coin, Melania, all of that happening right around last year, it really felt like, oh, okay, yeah, this is definitely happening to our society very rapidly. So Sloptimism is, I call it the Panglossian embrace of the total output of the attention economy. Pangloss was a character from Voltaire's Candide. He is a character who is a satire of people who are overly optimistic about things, about Leibniz specifically. And he basically, an increasingly number of horrible things befell him. And because he believes that this is the best of all possible worlds, he's always looking on the bright side and always finding the positive, the silver lining. So it was meant as satire, but I think it's also a good coping mechanism for a world that you don't have much control about. So that's why I sort of personally, I like this attitude. It allows you to both participate and critique at the same time. So it's about finding joy in the abject beauty and the hyperlibidinal recursive refinement of slop. It's about diving headfirst into the compressed soup of neurotransmitter triggering attentional entanglement. And like I said earlier, it's an end state of both conceptual art and postmodern finance. It represents both a condition and a strategic position within the cultural landscape. You don't have much of a choice, but you can, of course, embrace it more thoroughly if you want to. And it embraces the transformation of the conceptual art object into an attention conversion device, a mechanism that transmutes human attention into liquid capital through various technological and social mechanisms, like I described before. So attention as medium, attention as material, attention as process. I think it's very important to point out the initial transformer paper where LLMs were invented. It's called Attention is All You Need. The attention mechanism was, this is a non-technical, I'm abusing the term, but attention is what allowed LLMs to work. Again, I'm using the technical term, but I think it's very poignant. Panglossian anti-critique, like I mentioned, and then liquidity aesthetics, where that vibe, like I showed in that Kevin O'Leary video, becomes the aesthetic itself, where that rapid conversion of different forms of value becomes the point itself. And I didn't actually include any of these, but no, never mind, I'll get to it later. So here are some, I think, important mimetic moments in the history of Sloptimism. They're kind of roughly chronological. Yes, thank you. The handshake stuff. I think people use this a lot as cope. I think they're really beautiful images, of course, as well. That's kind of why I like them. But this was a lot of cope in the early days, along with the Will Smith spaghetti test, that these were, basically boondoggles that were being over invested in. But I think they were pretty important cultural touch points. Actually, some of this was earlier, but I think this was really important. I name one thing in this room meme. That's, I think, actually really sloptimistic because it really leans into the slop as sort of, as the real aesthetic there. And I think that was one of the first AI generated memes that I remember. There's definitely the shrimp Jesuses on Facebook and in general, all those things. And then I think Drippy Pope was really important. It was the first kind of photorealistic one. It was the first one where people were not quite sure if it was a deep fake or not. Got a lot of attention. Then this year, I think we saw a huge acceleration of slop becoming central to our culture. Italian brain rot. Italian brain rot to me is like a fascinating phenomenon. It's like the dream of Web3, decentralized IP created communally, but there was no tokens involved. There was attention economy arbitrage, of course. But I think the fact that that happened is really important. I, saw 4-year-olds saying "tralero tralala" on the playground. This type of penetration of AI culture, that was kind of unprecedented. I think the Please JD memes also very, very important and show how this is going to start having kind of political ramifications, especially as politicians start embracing it themselves. The Ghibli day was crazy to me. The whole feed was this. It was kind of like OpenAI total cultural victory. And it also involved, the White House posting this thing. And again, like, I don't know, like, it shows that AI is transgressive, but it's not necessarily countercultural if the White House is posting it, transgressive AI edgy memes. And I'm not quite sure what to make of that, but it's definitely a interesting inversion of previous cultural norms. Then yes, I think this, even in the later this year, as the quality increases, we see it just kind of subsuming our culture more. We had the realistic Sora videos, we had all the glass rock videos, and then recently we had, although I've heard this is not quite true, we had a AI generated country song that charted, and I think this is just the beginning of that trend. So I'll let this play too. I'm not sure if you'll hear it. I'll turn up the volume so you'll definitely hear it. Here, wait.
I was a little distracted because I was tracking the prediction market about what Coinbase will say on the next earnings call, and I just want to, add here the words Bitcoin, Ethereum, blockchain, staking, and Web3 to make sure we get those in before the end of the call.
Okay, yeah. So I think I'm probably too loud now. I'll turn it down a little bit. So
we've taken all of our questions. That's it for today.
Okay. Yeah, I think we should get used to living in an increasingly hyperstitional world where these types of ubiquitous prediction markets and hypergambling outlets create these recursive, self-fulfilling incentive loops like we just saw there. And automated capital kind of begins to affect causality itself. I tweeted this in response to Chauncey Billups being arrested for fixing NBA games, or actually it was poker games, but he also was fixing NBA games. This is an example of somebody doing market manipulation on a call. And of course, right now, this is considered criminal, but I do wonder what is the end state of this becoming fully normalized. So here are a few random predictions, and then I'm almost done. Sorry, I've taken a lot of time. One, I think spectator sport is going to turn into speculator sport. So if you imagine a new type of sport that basically allows for all the players and coaches to be insider trading and taking prediction market bets on the side, eventually you reach a new equilibrium. And so I normally think it's cringe to share pure GPT output, but I asked GPT to think of some new sports with this as the equilibrium. And I like this idea a lot of Minecraft League, where you're not winning on points alone, but you're winning, the teams win on P&L, basically based off of like how well they do based off of compared to the prediction of how well they would do. I think there's going to be some cool possibilities in this world. I also think like we said, the Drippy Popus Peak, that's going to be an emerging trend. What was once slop will become cherished as an aesthetic. I'm actually launching a nonprofit to try to preserve historic AI models for this very reason. I just want to get ahead of the trend. I know it's coming. I can already see it. I already see the demand for this stuff, and it's already very hard to access a lot of these models. And of course, beyond the aesthetic stuff, you see people like the ChatGPT 4o zombies, demanding an old model not get killed. I think we're going to see more of that. I also think that we're going to see botnets become, again, as right now, it's maybe an asymmetric thing, but the end state of that is it becomes a new publishing medium itself. And so, here's an example of the double speed company, the A16Z backed phone farm. I just think this kind of accelerates the end state. And here's an idea for a sculpture I had, which I want to build. I also think that as things become hard to discern being reality, there's going to be new forms of photojournalism. I have a friend named Sam Wilson, also Nick George knows him. He's working on an app that's doing this, where basically you can make a splat out of a composite of a lot of different cameras at the same time. And I think that'll become more important for establishing ground truth about actual events. There's going to be just need for this kinds of sources. I also think provably human spaces are going to be luxurious to inhabit. So all of this, all of my Sloptimism, it accelerates the backlash as well. And more generally, I think the only way out is through, we don't have an option here. You should engage with this world and embrace it, and try to make the most of it. And I won't take up any more time playing this song, but here's a Slop song about hypergambling, which if you want, I'll send it to you later. Thanks for all of your time. Bye.